our first ever Art Basel. With us today, we have Nicholas Key, who's co-founder and CEO, and a very good friend of mine of Key Farms. We have virtually with us Priya Guliani, the founder and CEO of IntelliAqua, and then Jacob Dalhoff Steensen. I hope I didn't say it wrong. Who's over in Europe. Awesome. With MoonjellyDAO. And we are so excited to have all of you guys here today. I would love to just start off with some intros. Nick, would you like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you're working on?
Oh, yes. So, as Daniel mentioned, Nicholas Key, I'm CEO, co-founder of Key Farms. We're essentially a regenerative ocean farm based out of Jamaica, at least for now. And so practically what we do, we grow seaweed, oysters, soon to be sea cucumbers. And so we are basically responsible for training as many fishermen all over the country and hopefully in the Caribbean to do the same. And we're also doing this in a decentralized way via a DAO. Yeah.
Awesome. And we will jump more into these things. The goal today is really, we're going to talk a lot of technical terms, but really make them tangible and understandable. So with that, I'll throw it to Priya, talk a little bit about what you're working on.
Thank you, Daniel. Absolutely delighted to be here today, and so pleased to be joining Nick and Jacob as well. I'm Priya Guliani, founder and CEO of IntelliAqua. We combine technology intelligence with aquaculture science to build an inclusive, sustainable, and efficient value chain, empowering the underserved aquaculture farmers to maximize productivity as well as significantly contribute to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I also wear another hat. I'm the UK President for Government Blockchain Association. I am passionate about inclusion, sustainability, and climate impact, and chair the Sustainable Environmental Stewardship Working Group as well. The mission is to create sustainable, attainable, and maintainable solutions to help communities and the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. And also, I should say I'm a little biased because both Nicholas and Priya were part of our inaugural cohort that we just wrapped up last month, and I am excited to hear more. Maybe later we'll talk about how it's been since. But before we do that, Jacob would love to have you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Moonjelly.
Yes, so my name is Jacob. I'm originally from Denmark, based in a little bit outside of Lisbon, Portugal, at the moment. To summarize it very briefly, I think I'm a diving instructor, gone blockchain, gone complete DAO down that rabbit hole, and that has materialized in the MoonjellyDAO, which is the project that the team and I are working on at the moment. What we want to facilitate with the MoonjellyDAO is basically bring together all of the different functionalities that smart contracts enables, and create an infrastructure that will enable communities to work together, not only in their communities, but across other communities as well, all with a focus on scaling or increasing the amount of funding flowing into ocean impact, the amount of reporting flowing back again. And the DAO structures and the smart contracts, you can go very technical on that, but that really allows for some very interesting organizational structures that I would love to talk some more about. But that's what we're looking into at Moonjelly. You can read more on the website and join our Discord to get more involved. That's all on the website, moonjelly.io.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. Well, I want to first start by starting to demystify some of these terms, which I'm sure a lot of folks in the ocean space may not be familiar with. And so I'm going to bounce around to each of you to kind of just go over some basic concepts. So starting with Priya, you want to talk about just what is blockchain and really what it means for the world?
Sure, absolutely, yes. A blockchain is a distributed ledger shared between many parties, which enable trustworthy transactions or exchanges between strangers. So basically, without the need for a trusted third party or a mediator. These transactions are secured by cryptography and automated by smart contracts. If I were to put it in one sentence, which people really struggle to put it, blockchain is a distributed ledger of multi-party transactions with decentralized control. And that's exactly where all the essence is. It transforms a multi-party system by flattening it. So imagine a traditional system where multiple parties maintain their data on traditional ledgers or databases. The traditional ledger structure between organization is slow and error prone, and also the existing infrastructure is manually intensive and dated. Any exchange of data that is required that requires that all of the data stores as well as each of the participants agree and reconcile, resulting in significant effort as well as inefficiency. Now, come blockchain, the entire ecosystem gets flattened to achieve efficiency. A distributed blockchain ledger allows for decentralized, replicated, shared, and cryptographically secured operations validated by mass collaboration and applied to many transactions. So all market participants work from the same data set, introducing significant efficiency improvement.
Amazing. And so now,
I think,
oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, what?
No.
I can't hear you properly.
Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead. Sorry. Okay. We'll
Still couldn't hear you. Sorry, Daniel.
All right, we'll move along. It's okay. So basically, built on blockchain though is now kind of this next wave that is, crypto and NFTs. And I know I only recently, just on Monday, actually bought my first NFT. But I'm a little slow, but getting there. But Nick, why don't you talk a little bit about what is crypto, tokens, NFTs, and what that means for the ocean space?
Yeah, so there's a huge opportunity now, I think especially in the climate change space generally. Of course, the blockchain scene has been around for a while, and we've more or less like seeded the notion that crypto is the most mainstream way for us to introduce the rest of the world to the blockchain space. But within the climate change space specifically, there is a whole opportunity for us to really tag and also just trace a lot of the impact that can be done and would be done over the next coming years. And so crypto is essentially one of those ways in which we can incentivize that tracking and tracing to happen, and also to just find a way to funnel and pull the impact and match it with the dollars. And so in that breath, we can think of maybe just like tagging the amount of mangroves, for instance, that are probably created or just seeded, and just tracing the amount of carbon that can be sequestered from their just growth, and then rewarding that with tokens. That's one opportunity. And there are a whole suite of avenues for you to dive into. I guess specifically within the space of like NFTs, you can probably have maybe an entire area of land or a plot of land that is dedicated towards climate change resilient solutions and practices within farming. And that can then be applied and just hashed and traced and sold. And so that is like proof of impact along the entire spectrum.
And as you've already heard me brainstorm quite a bit on this, I think it really is this mechanism that can help drive people learning to actually value impact and actually create value for impact. And so that's what gets me excited. Well, Jacob, speaking of calling on you, I would love to then hear from you. So tell us a little bit about what are DAOs and what does, again, it mean for the ocean space, especially with what you're doing at Moonjelly.
Yeah, sorry for that. It's quite hard to hear you guys up there, but I assume that you kind of pushed it over to DAOs and what that can do for the ocean.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of interesting things in both what Priya said and what Nick said with regards to blockchain and NFTs. And essentially, what DAOs are is a organizational structure that is enabled by the existence of blockchain and smart contracts. So you can basically, how do I start it? It's essentially a infrastructure for a community to organize itself automate its payment system, secure its voting system, so that when you look at a traditional corporation today, you have the board, the C-suite, the investors, the owners, and you have this hierarchical structure where a lot of decisions, they need to go up to the top before they can go further down. And there's this responsibility placed on one person. But what a DAO does is that because of these mechanisms of voting and automated payments that can be done, a DAO makes you able to gather as a community and set a course and a direction, coordinate yourselves within that community in working groups that works towards that common goal and mission, without having a C-suite or an entity that has the overall say. So that this structure, the DAO structure, you could look at it as a new type of LLC or NGO, or it's a new kind of organizational structure, which can be applied to the smallest group of people. I mean, essentially a group of 3 or 4 people can be a DAO. A DAO is short, I should have started with that, for a decentralized autonomous organization. So it will very efficiently help communities organize itself. And the way that we are doing that in MoonjellyDAO is we can create an infrastructure. We are creating an infrastructure, and more importantly, a community around creating that infrastructure and developing that infrastructure and then ending up using it. So we're developing an infrastructure to increase funding into ocean impact. And this is essentially a advanced, what's called a grants DAO, where we are able to niche educate people in certain areas to be able to do due diligence on an NGO, for instance. So let's take that use case, right? We have a lot of money in the top, given out in Earthshot prizes and whatnot, or through grants that has a long application process. It takes a lot of resources for the NGOs to apply for this money, and they have a one out of a million, 1 out of 1,000 chance of getting those money. So there's a lot of money wasted that could go to real impact here. Once these applications or calls for proposals are made, you are as a family office or a fund, you have a huge task load in processing all of these NGOs, these project proposals, right? And in the MoonjellyDAO and with that ecosystem, we can essentially facilitate people to educate themselves to take a lot of that process over. So we create a legacy ocean impact due diligence procedure that is based on the knowledge that is today. And then we essentially teach the community, the population, to do these small niche tasks that they can do either full-time, part-time, or in the lunch break. So this is a very concrete example of how to decentralize a task to a certain degree, still with the oversight of a council structure that has that knowledge that's necessary to approve projects for funding or to verify impact reporting, for instance. There are so many use cases that you can use the DAO structure in. It's going to change everything in my mind when it comes to governance and financial structures. And it all involves NFTs and smart contracts. The DAO is sort of just the organizational structure that is facilitated by that, which is, sorry, last comment, which is a lot of old concepts that we already know in governance and finance, but they're just 2.0.
Amazing. Well,
sorry,
go ahead. All right. Thank you, Jacob. Well, I was going to say, I feel like now we've kind of worked from bottom to top, doing from the basics of blockchain to crypto tokens and now DAOs. So now, Jacob, I think you did an amazing job of mapping out exactly what that means for the ocean space with Moonjelly. So now I'd like to come back down and say, Nick, you want to talk a little bit more about what actually some of the applications are for some of these technologies with tokenization as well, and some of the work you're doing with that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's a huge opportunity that hadn't really been identified before that I think we've basically tried to take advantage of. So within, of course, this space, climate change space specifically, there are things called credits, carbon credits, that is. And these carbon credits are sometimes can be voluntary, but in other cases, they serve as like offsets for all of the damages that a lot of the big tech and big oil companies tend to purport. And so what they're doing is essentially just, I guess, giving back, or, you know, helping to try to save the planet in a different way. So they're either contributing voluntarily to organizations that are doing climate change resilient practices, or just doing activities surrounding in the space, or they are being taxed by different government infrastructures and, you know, regions. And so what happens is that when all of those credits are accrued, they are then contributed back to these projects, but they're just done in a very top-heavy way. And so a lot of the impact is not seeded where it's supposed to be seeded in, I guess, a decentralized way. So what this looks like practically is that if maybe Microsoft or IBM, for instance, wanted to purchase, wanted to say that they wanted to offset maybe 10,000 carbon tons per year over the next 10 years. That definitely is possible, but you would find that because the demand is so heavy, there's almost no way to then seed that into smaller projects. And so what we've essentially done is to tokenize these credits themselves so that they can be seeded into a lot of the small ocean farmers that we have within the network.
And I think, we say basically, business and unsustainable practices are single bottom line, right? They're only profit driven and economic impact driven, essentially. And what you're talking about is essentially triple bottom line, to say it's not just the economic impact, but it's social and environmental impact. And I think mechanistically, and as a mechanical engineer, I'm a little biased toward that, it makes just such a huge difference in the way that we do business, and the way that I think the regenerative blue economy, as we like to say, is evolving, where we can actually have these systems that create tangible value for things that previously did not have that value. And so I think that's incredible. And speaking of creating value, I think the other side of this is the traceability aspect and the transparency aspect, which Priya, I'd love to hear you touch on a little bit of that as well.
Sure, thanks, Daniel. I think I would just like to circle back on the question that you asked before as well, that where exactly blockchain has significance in the ocean tech space, etc. So as EDA, I think in the ocean space specifically, we're seeing a lot of interesting use cases in supply chain, recycling and sustainability efforts, maritime, shipping, as well as defense. So it's really powerful that, and really disruptive, that how this technology is finding its way and paving its path through different sectors and different use cases. Just to give a couple of examples, the ability to reduce trade documentation, processing costs, delays, data manipulation, fraud, and human error through uncompromisable smart contracts makes blockchain technology attractive to the shipping world, basically logistics. A lot of excellent projects around sustainability as well. So I really like a project which is called Plastic Bank. And what they do is they promote plastic recycling via blockchain-based system, and thus enabling a better planet and a better ocean. Coming back to supply chain, blockchain stands as the gatekeeper in the emerging trust economy, so in which supply chain plays a central role. So for example, the efficiency of the supply chain relies on trust between the various stakeholders. Taking an example of what we do at IntelliAqua, we have a solution called IntelliTrace that ensures point-to-plate supply chain traceability of not just the status, but also the location and the actors of the supply chain. The seafood industry, as you would know, is often criticized for its complex, data deficient, and particularly opaque supply chains. And these provide rooms for operational inefficiencies and open the door to issues such as mislabeling fraud, antibiotics in the produce, labor right violations, I'm sure you've seen the news, seen the documentary Cease Piracy, and know all about that. But IntelliTrace, what it does, it uses technologies like blockchain, QR codes, and sensors to monitor the movement of produce through the supply chain in real time. Basically, we have tracking to controlling to empowering end consumers with real-time updates. And this basically improves traceability, accuracy, and accountability along seafood value chain. And overall, it provides all of the stakeholders with visibility, helping to eliminate bottlenecks where they are within the contemplate supply chain, and getting visibility of the vulnerabilities and redesigning for resilience across the ecosystem. If I were to give a very fascinating example, then a few years ago, there was this E. coli breakout in lettuce, and Walmart had to really throw all of their lettuce, whatever they had, and it took them 6.5 days to actually figure out that where that lettuce was coming from, figure out the source, and then basically, take it off the shelves. And once they had actually moved to a blockchain-based system, they could do it in 3.5 seconds. So that's the power of the blockchain. And people really argue that while there are other technology options that exist to help manage supply chain, how blockchains are basically different. So I think to me, they basically add another arrow in the quiver, which is like that can bring different parties that have not established trust between themselves. And through that, it provides transparency and tamper evident nature. And I think that's the powerful application of blockchain. I can talk a little bit more if time allows, but yeah, that's the essence, that it brings the transparency, it brings auditability, and that's what IntelliAqua is doing for the seafood produce specifically. Because if we talk about tuna, if we talk about shrimps, then there is a lot of product fraud and there's a lot of inaccurate labeling that happens. And to detect those fraudulent actors and the transactions, we need to figure out and hold somebody accountable. We need to figure out where the source of all of this is. And IntelliAqua does exactly that through IntelliTrace.
Amazing. So now, Jacob, I'm going to throw it back to you on the DAO front. What does that mean for traceability and for all of this, basically, creating this almost crowdfunding mechanism, but more importantly, something that's actually transparent and leading to something that, truly people can have a much better feeling getting behind, knowing exactly where the money is coming from and where it's going.
So that's in the DAO structure. That is essentially what is facilitated by the blockchain and this open ledger, right? So that every transaction are visible and tracked. I also like the governance system that a DAO structure allows for is really to, and this can be molded and shaped into the different voting structure that's necessary, but essentially that you can give a vote and you can take it away as easily afterwards. So in the Moonjelly ecosystem, for instance, we will support the structure. So we have the community filtering through NGOs and doing a lot of other work as well. That's just one page. And then we have this council structure in the back that makes sure that the matter experts are involved in the decisions as they move further up. And these matter experts are voted upon openly, and these votes can be taken back or moved to someone else. It's not like you're sitting at a term for 4 years and then you can basically forget about all your promises that you made in the election period, right? So it's it makes this whole system a lot more fluid and traceable, not only transaction wise and finance wise and where does money go, but what do people do, how do they contribute, how do they interact, and it's all in the interest of making the organization more transparent and efficient. Everybody knows what's going on from an overview kind of.
And I think when we talk about impact investing and ESG, right, that G of governance, I think it's still very that's probably the loosest term I want to say of the three, right? Environmental, social, and governance. The environmental and social has been around for a while. Environmental impact and social impact, but the governance side, I think, is something that I've been waiting to see what that really looks like and what mechanisms really enable us to create these systems moving forward that create value and again create transparency. So I think DAOs as that G of governance and ESG is such a critical piece of this puzzle. And to your point, Jacob, I think, just as something that can make this actually A, more digestible, and B, accessible for people to actually have a say in where money goes, what solutions actually get funded, how hopefully investors start to actually allocate their funds and more. So huge implications there. Nick, I'm going to throw it to you as well. Just how might this, whether it's crypto tokens or DAOs of DAOs, which I know you're into, create this traceable system and transparent as well.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to jump back to something that I said earlier. So if you can just imagine just seeding a mangrove or just trying to grow one and having that being managed by a sanctuary or a conservatory, they are essentially doing majority of the activities that lead to a lot of the impact that we would need to see in our oceans and the entire bio-ecosystem. So just imagine a mangrove is seeded that is probably affixed to maybe 1 carbon ton hypothetically, and as it grows, it essentially just increases in value. That token itself is not just 1, it becomes 2 per year, based on how much carbon can be sequestered and pulled in from the growth itself. And so this growth can be traced and tracked on a ledger, a decentralized ledger, the blockchain that is, and over time, those who are interested in probably understanding the life cycle and the impact that this sanctuary could have over the next couple of years, that can be seen by the general public. And if needs be, all of this effort and impact can be rewarded with actual cash. This cash can be, in this case, cryptocurrencies. But this can also just be seeded as rewards and transferred into any other currency available based on whatever jurisdiction that you plan to have that kind of impact.
So just to real quick, let's just walk through a quick example, right, with what you're working on. So I think carbon credits, are right now the biggest proof of concept. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so carbon credits, the carbon trading market has been around for years now. It was basically an effort purported based on the projections of us heading towards disaster. And so it is essentially planned that if we don't pull down as much carbon dioxide from the atmosphere each year, then it would be hard to hit our very strong targets to becoming more balanced as an entire world with respect to the climate, and what that looks like practically. So you essentially conduct activities. So you probably grow seaweed. In our case, you grow seaweed, you grow oysters, then you essentially just measure how much carbon can be pulled from and captured from the growth itself. Then you're able to just sell the seaweed itself, and you're also able to capture how much value that was added to the environment from the carbon pull. And this value itself is then sold to the market, and that is how the market works.
So I think it's a really important point to say that basically this is, again, some way to make, carbon credits historically have only been accessible to government, primarily governments and maybe corporations. And so now individual people can have access to these credits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The small farmers, the small fishermen, those who are, interested in the space can definitely have an impact now.
And so I think this leads great into our next question, which is really the real world utility point of this. The real world utility point of these tokens and how this actually translates to the ocean, right? Because we're seeing now this as Nick pointed out, where if you can have these measurable impacts, quantifiable, transparent, traceable impacts, right, then we can create real value with cryptocurrencies and tokens. And so I'm going to throw it back to Priya and ask our next question, which is how might the tokens, tokenomics, and NFTs really link the physical and virtual worlds and create impact? Oh, Priya, you're muted. Not sure if she could hear us. Jacob, did you hear the question? You can answer first if you'd like.
Yes. Sorry, could you ask the question again? How might NFTs? I didn't hear it fully.
Yes, how might tokenomics and NFTs link the virtual and physical worlds and drive impact?
Yeah, sorry. I mean, there are a lot of ways that NFTs could do that. It's already proven a great fundraising source. You do artwork. There are plenty of campaigns like that where the ocean space is raising funds, and every other charity space is raising funds from NFT sales. But basically, NFTs is not only a picture; it's a certificate. It can be tied to anything. So you can let your imagination, really go wild on that, and it will. It's only the most apparent ones, like imagery but also carbon credits that are being looked into now and really expanded upon. We're trying to, with Moonjelly and the tokenomic structure that we have soon to disclose, we're trying to look a little bit further, or see if we can bend the curve a little bit, or quite a lot actually. So what I'm trying to say is that a lot of things will be tokenized from now moving forward. And I think this is just my thoughts, but I think there is a lot to look in when you look at carbon credits and stuff like that. There's a lot to look into when it comes to whales, for instance, other biodiversity, and ecosystems, and how that might be connected. So, but for now, the full focus, as it seems to me, is on art and also tracking, storing different information on these NFTs, and then also, of course, the carbon credits, which is also a very, very young and immature market when it comes to tokenized, what's it called? It's like discarded units, carbon units that are tokenized, and it's very undefined still. I know Vera, they came out with a press release, an announcement on tokens and crypto. I think it was yesterday or the day before. So there's a lot of trailblazing being done there at the moment as well, and it will grow immensely over time. It's basically, we're now able to put the ocean on a spreadsheet more than we have ever been, and that will just keep expanding, which is hugely exciting for the ocean. Can make it much more quantifiable, basically.
I love that expression, putting the ocean on a spreadsheet, not just because I'm an engineer, but really because it gets back to, we know so little about the ocean. We've explored less than 20% of the ocean, and now we're literally talking about systems where we can quantify everything and actually start to make sense of what's there. I think a lot of people get idealistic about saying we can save the ocean when we don't even know what we're saving. And now here we are creating the architecture with DAOs and blockchain to say, not only can we quantify it, but we can create this immutable ledger that actually says, here's all of the different parts to what, whether it's the impact value of what we're creating or the economies and economic drivers we're creating, all of these different pieces that, this technology is just such an exciting piece of the puzzle for. So I'm going to move on to our next question, which is, what role might DAOs play in building regenerative and sustainable blue economies, as well as catalyzing these new funding systems? Nicholas, I'll throw it back to you to start.
Yeah, so it has been historically very hard to just raise funds for things within the climate change space. It is arguably probably the hardest space to enter right now, mainly because there are just so many variables to account for. I mean, it's not like within core tech for maybe an app. It's very translatable in that way, where you have immediate consumers and beneficiaries that are like at the table and available in the market. Within the climate change space, everything is a bit hidden. And so it's very hard to make the impact apparent to everyone when it needs a bit more understanding of the true problems and the true measures of progress, and better better understanding of the variables themselves that we need to move the needle towards hitting our target goals and impact. But within the blockchain space, or I guess the merger of both, this is a bit more achievable because of traceability, of course. There is a pathway for investors alike, or just anyone who probably is interested in space to truly help fund a lot of the activities that are going on now. So you can think of like funds for traditional climate change, projects to maybe grow trees, taking months to raise, or even years in some cases. That can be truncated in a decentralized way from people all over the world to just put into this fund and help achieve that fundraising mark and goal in just a couple of weeks in some cases.
Well, and I think, so getting a little into Seaworthy's thesis on both the funding mechanism side, and I think some of the problem a lot of people don't see in the ocean space is the fact that there's so little public funding historically for this work. All the technology, we like to say, exists for solving climate change, reversing ocean degradation, actually enabling biodiversity regeneration. It all exists. It's just a question of how we actually can mechanistically start to create these avenues for support and create these systems that are regenerative and have actual, again, economic driver for impact. And again, I'm heavily bullish on DAOs being that. So I will now throw it to Priya to answer our question as well. Again, how might DAOs help build these regenerative and sustainable blue economies and catalyze these funding streams?
Sure. Thanks, Daniel. Sorry, I got stuck at the earlier question, and it's really hard to hear you, but Jeff is being amazing to put the questions on chat for us. I absolutely love Nick's project, and I think that's a great use case of how exactly we can support the regeneration and sustainable blue economy, so that he's explained already. I particularly feel that with a lot of excitement surrounding the rise of decentralized finance and the raging bull market for non-fungible tokens, decentralized DAOs have basically received far less acknowledgement, despite playing an increasingly vital role in expanding the ambit of global crypto ecosystem. I particularly feel, with respect to reward mechanism that puts the community in the center and their beliefs at the center stage, DAO projects particularly open that plethora of opportunities for people to invest, and they offer a much better value proposition for both investors and regular users who wish to utilize the platform to transact over various blockchains. So basically, whatever projects whatever themes you're passionate about, whatever concerns you're worried about, the ability to put that and create a structure around it, I think it's really powerful. And with the future vision of integrating more blockchains and providing native support to create and trade smart digital assets and with custom rules, DAO exchanges definitely are poised to redefine the way we will transact and obviously give much more power and inclusion to all of these varied use cases that that have been neglected so far. So a lot of interesting use cases with respect to ocean and sustainable blue economy, definitely.
I just want to say I can't wait to watch this recording back because I know I'm already learning a lot. So and really, I think it's just, as I know a lot of people love to say like, this is the future, right? And just get caught up in the hype of it. But I think what we've seen so far, and to your point about the bull market for NFTs, so far it's been this hype because we have actually already found at least a use case for it. But I think the greater utility when we talk about economy building and not just novelties, right, is something that I think we're still just scratching the surface on. And getting back to Jacob and your work, I think you're one of the first ocean DAOs, right? And so what does this mean as far as your role in helping facilitate these new funding systems and what that looks like?
I got half of that question, sorry, Daniel. but I think I don't know if I'll answer a little bit, and then you can tell me if it was adequate enough. The DAOs, it's an organizational structure, right? And I second everything you said, Priya. Beautifully put, I have to admit. But what's really, to me, the interesting thing here is that the for the value drive, for the money driver, the increased funding and stuff like that is the DeFi aspect, right? So a DAO can exist without a DeFi treasury, but a DAO with a DeFi treasury is really, really interesting. So what is a DeFi treasury? It's essentially a new suite of financial products that are available today because of smart contracts. It's the same way as you could compare it actually to the old way of doing it would be the landline. So let's look at borrower lending protocols, right? So the way that the banks today lends out money would be the landline, and the way that we now can facilitate borrower lending through smart contracts in a DeFi treasury is the internet. So it's kind of an upgrade of these financial products that now sounds like hocus pocus and magic, because it was like when we invented the fire, I guess. It looked very magical too. And a lot of these financial products, they're very real, but they drive yields of upwards 10-15% on a very, very low risk, and much higher obscene numbers of yields can be harvested now, I would say, farmed. So that's really interesting area to look into, and concept of DeFi 2 has now emerged, which is also really, really interesting. But if you look at the very fundamental aspects of a borrower lending protocol, it's basically you have a piece of code. Instead of putting your money in your bank, you lock it in this piece of code, and then other people can come and loan from that piece of code, and to unlock the money that they want to loan, they just have to put in some crypto in collateral. That's the very short of it, and it's designed in a way so that the people providing the liquidity cannot be burnt or cannot lose their money. And because this is facilitated by a smart contract and not a bank office, there are minimal fees, which means that all the interest that the donor pays goes directly to the liquidity provider. So that's some of these functionalities that will just open up funding in a way that has not really been possible before, which is really, really interesting.
Well, and to start to wrap up the conversation, I feel like you hit on a term that I'm really excited about, and I think is the real bleeding edge, which is regenerative decentralized finance. And again, this is just the beginning of what this all looks like. And I think just from all of the different mechanisms, from blockchain, crypto, NFTs, DAOs, we've really, I think, gotten a great, starting point, at least for people to really understand how this is actually evolving to be the future of the field. I'd love to close today with one last question, which is always our softball to wrap things up, which is, what advice do you have for current and aspiring blockchain technologists looking to drive ocean and climate impact? And Priya, I'll throw it back to you.
Oh, yes. So I would want to start my advice with a caveat that blockchain technology is definitely not a panacea for all business problems. However, its unique characteristics make it potentially superior to the other technologies for various business applications, right? And we've seen at GBA that it opens the world of opportunity for positive social impact, particularly in environment space, ocean space, etc. We're inspired every day by our collaborations with enterprises and governments and NGOs to make this a more inclusive, fair, and sustainable world. And we at IntelliAqua have also seen that how integrating blockchain with other technologies such as Internet of Things and AI have further elevated the associated business benefits. So, if harnessed in the right way, blockchain can potentially enable a move to cleaner and more resource-preserving decentralized solutions and unlock natural capital as well as empower communities. So my advice is around that: focus on the change you want to bring, focus on the problem you want to solve and the value that you want to create, and then look out if blockchain is applicable for you. Seek out advice from the people in the industry. I particularly have found blockchain space quite welcoming, and it truly lives up to its decentralized nature. So definitely, focus on the problem you want to solve, and then see if blockchain is applicable for you, and seek out people from the industry to support you.
Amazing, thank you. Nicholas, how about you?
Yeah, I think I'll go a bit more practical. Prepare to, I guess, combat with the Web 2.0 space, and just double down on doing a whole lot of due diligence on what the space even means. Possibly even just get some buy-in from a lot of the actors. Read a lot of the white papers and the other projects out there. Buy some crypto, buy some NFTs, and prepare to be an outlier. And being an outlier is a bit complicated. You will have to interface with people who definitely don't believe in you, but there is a high ROI at the end of the tunnel.
I love that, being an outlier. You know, I mean, I know I just finally got to take the dive into crypto and NFTs myself, buying my first NFT this week, and I really think it is, you know, to your point, still early in the space, and especially if you're not in Miami, you know, you're definitely an outlier, and a lot of other cities getting into the space still, but it is happening, it is evolving, and as we've discussed today, there's real meaning for it for the oceans. So to wrap up, Jacob, would love to hear your advice as well.
Yes, I mean, what has helped me on this journey, which has been a very steep learning curve, is acceptance kind of needs to go in front of understanding. When you come to some of these concepts, when looking into blockchain and smart contracts and DAOs, you will really help yourself with just accepting some things as, okay, that's how it is, and then moving in front of that and see how you can use that as a fact, and then the understanding will come. Then I think DAOs is an incredible new way of interacting with the space that completely reinvents the way that we apply for jobs, employ people, collaborate. It will rip that structure apart and put it back together. And a way to very easily get engaged is to Google decentralized autonomous organizations and try to find organizations, DAOs, that are working on topics that you care about. You will basically be able, you're going to be joining what's called a Discord. Some of you are familiar to it, some are not. But it's essentially a place where you can just go in and say, hey, here I am. I would like to help out. I can do this, this, and that. It does not have to be technologically related in any way, shape, or form. You can just walk in from the street and talk to the guys behind the projects and start working out, like helping them out, just as you can with Moonjelly, of course. So on a final note, go in and check how a DAO kind of society looks like from the very beginning by going to moonjelly.io, and then you can join our Discord from there. That's a great example. So that would be my advice: accept before understanding, and go join a DAO. That's a great way in.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jacob. And I just love to connect the dots and say, here in Miami, our mayor is famous for saying, how can I help? And it's cool to hear that happening, that same ethos be in Denmark. So we are going to wrap up this first panel. I want to first, again, thank Priya, Jacob, and Nicholas for being an amazing and patient with technology difficulties here. But we have had an amazing time talking with you guys. And we have our second panel coming up in about 15 minutes. So stick around and we'll be back in a bit. Thank you guys so much.